agency come to order. It's Thursday, February 13th. It's now 2:05. Apologize for being a bit tardy. This is being streamed live on YouTube. Let's begin by introducing the members of the agency. Anna Liu, Vice Chair. Hi, Anna. Nui Browning. Hi, Nui. Nate Gaddis is available, and unfortunately, Alan Okanaka is absent but excused. I'm the chair, James McCulley. We have a quorum to hold this meeting. Supporting us from the Office of Corporation Counsel is Deputy Corp Counsel Jean Campbell. Hi, Jean, in the Planning Department office, and joining her there is our staff, Rochelle Lay. Hi, Rochelle.
Hi, guys.
Okay. Housekeeping, let's keep the cell phones turned off or on silent mode. If there's anyone here who would like to testify, please fill out the sign-up form. We don't have that. If you have testimony on Zoom, please keep your video camera off and audio muted until you're called to speak. Note that this meeting is using the Zoom platform. Your YouTube live stream is provided only as a courtesy. Therefore, our meeting will proceed even if the YouTube connection fails. We welcome members of the public to provide testimony regarding any agenda item, either now or the time the agenda item is called, pursuant to the agency's rules in order to provide an equal opportunity to individuals who wish to provide oral testimony to the agency. The chair may limit the time allotted for oral testimony to only 1 3-minute allotment for each agenda item, unless otherwise specified by myself. Additionally, the chair may limit testimony which is irrelevant, abusive, disruptive, or unduly repetitious. Testimony must be limited to those topics on today's agenda. The chair is the arbiter. All members of the public shall extend proper courtesy and respect to one another, agency members, and staff. Any person who does not abide by these rules may be ruled out of order by the chair and asked to leave or be removed from the meeting. We appreciate everyone's aloha spirit. Rochelle, do we have any testifiers?
We have one person on, Ivanhoe. I'm not sure. Are you testifying?
No, I'm just listening. Thanks.
Okay. No, we don't have any testifiers otherwise.
All right, great. Thank you. Let's see. Should you choose to testify, Ivan, or anyone else, we will swear you in. Let's see. Business of the agency. The first agenda item we'd like to invite Karen Tashima from the Office of the Mayor to provide an update related to Banyan Drive. Does anyone want to provide testimony on this item? Seeing none. Public testimony on this item is now closed. Thank you, Karen, for being with us today. The floor is yours.
Hi, Jim. Aloha, everyone. My name is Karen Tashima, and I'm actually the newly just started on opening day, legislative liaison for Mayor Kimo Alameda. And, I just want to thank you for having me here and overall support, the county on behalf of Mayor Kimo Alameda and the County of Hawaii. We strongly support, House Bill 818, and just it recognizes that establishing the Waiakea Peninsula Community Development District would help revitalize the region and enhance economic opportunities, improve public spaces, and expand recreational, educational, and entertainment facilities. For me personally, born and raised with family who came and grew up in the peninsula area, this initiative just aligns with the county and long-term goals for sustainability, development, and community enrichment, and just making it for all of us Hawaii Island residents, just something we want to see move forward. So with that, thank you. I really don't have much more to say, but mahalo.
Oh, okay. Thank you, Karen. Members, do any of you have questions for Ms. Tashima?
Yeah, I do. Hi, Ms. Tashima. Nice to meet you by Zoom. I wanted to just know if there's anything specific in your role as liaison that the mayor's instructed you to do or anything specific you had planned, being that he's in support of 818, House bill, which is currently progressing through the House side, but hasn't been scheduled yet for a hearing on the Senate side
Correct.
by Chair Inouye. I just wanted to just give you an opportunity if there isn't anything that's been generated yet, that's fine. I just wanted to ask the question.
Yeah, nothing that has been generated yet, but we are looking into reaching out.
Great.
So I can leave it at that for now. So
That's fine.
but yes, yeah, looking into those relationships and as we move forward. So
All right.
hope that answers your question.
Yeah, absolutely. No, we just wanted to give it a minute in case there was
Yes.
something specific happening. Great.
Yes, thank you.
Any other members have questions? Nui or Anna? You're good. Karen, I have a question. In discussions with the mayor, at our last meeting, it was brought up about the general plan,
Right.
the evolving general plan. So has the mayor discussed with his staff administration and with planning department how to utilize the intention of HB 818 and how that might be supported or affect our general plan? Is that in discussion?
It might be in discussion with the planning department. I have not been in any of those discussions as of yet.
Okay. Because, the general plan is kind of a precedent or the underlying document. And so in the testimony by the mayor, if there's a specific interest by the county and it's addressed in a nascent or evolving general plan, that could have some effect. So I was just curious about that.
Yeah.
Unfortunately, we don't have Jeff today, so he could probably have answered to that.
Okay. Yeah, I don't, this is Nate Gaddis again, speaking up. I don't, I understand you don't indirectly necessarily interface with planning on a daily basis, but I just want to bookmark, because we're in the meeting on the record currently also, that we do have those funds that were set aside, $1 million funds that were set aside for the HCDA study by Representative Nakashima. So it would be really, if you're aware of or whenever planning, or it would be important for planning to also weigh in, I believe and Jim had brought this up at the last meeting, potential lasting uses for those funds, because the county can weigh in on that, what might be most productive for them. Jim had mentioned, for example, and actually originally this was brought up by prior administrations and prior planning staff, having like a blanket EIS done that could be a lasting document to serve as a foundation moving forward. And the roadblock to that always traditionally was funding. So we think that's a great opportunity for the county to be able to weigh in on that as well, in terms of the scope of work that would be most useful and productive. That's all. Yeah.
Oh, thank you, Nate.
Thank you.
So Karen, you're processing all of that?
Yes, and we kind of discussed the $1 million, and the EIS. So yes.
Yeah.
Okay. On that subject, now that it's been brought up, those monies were specified for a master plan. So we've had some other planning documents that have occurred on the peninsula, most recently the $300,000 conceptual plan. We'd had earlier, community input plans that the planning department had engendered. So I questioned with some legislators and with HCDA, Craig Nakamoto, what can come under that umbrella of the $1 million. And it would be helpful, I think, if the mayor was able to act as an advocate, perhaps in his testimony, on the subject of 818, but referring back to that CIP number of $1 million.
Okay.
If there's a generalized master plan that's, say, contracted at the differential between what a general EIS costs, so say a master plan budgeted at $250,000 and an EIS at $750 or whatever it should happen to be, but those could be put out for bids. Then we could come up with a hard document for a soft plan. So the soft general plan that the mayor might advocate for would be, he envisions vertical developments for senior housing, additional hotels, whatever could occur on a vertical basis commercial developments, recreational developments, and in other words, these buckets of uses throughout the peninsula. And that's the conceptual master plan. Now the EIS could be targeted to, can you do those types of things on the peninsula, given the environmental issues there, or perhaps climactic elements. But anyway, so that would be the specifics that the mayor might call out as somebody who's grounded in Hilo. Yeah.
Right, correct.
Anyway, I bring that up because what we're vitally concerned with that $1 million being expended and not returned to the general fund bucket, which will occur if it's not utilized. It will only last, I think, 2 years. And we're ending our first year.
Yes.
All right, let's see. Is there any other questions? Hearing none, we will move on. Karen, thank you so much for attending, and please give our aloha to Mayor.
Yes, and I'll pass on the information as well. Thank you.
Thank you. Thanks.
Great.
Okay, next on the agenda is our discussion and decision on this agency's position on HB 818. It relates to the Waikea Peninsula Community Development District. Does anyone want to provide testimony on this agenda item? Seeing and hearing none, public testimony on this item is now closed. I'll provide a brief overview of 818 to introduce the agenda item, and following this brief summary, the agency can consider whether and how to provide testimony to the legislature. Please hold your motions and discussion until I've completed this overview. I don't want to be pedantic, or if you've read it, it's a dozen pages, 13 pages. It mostly is addressing HRS 206E, which is the community development districts. So it's going to create a new community development district. So it starts off with a public purpose, why. I think we as members of the agency are very intimately familiar with why a community development district would be an effective path forward. The first thing that the statute requires would be the establishment of the district boundaries. This is the historic Waikea Peninsula that extends slightly up the Wailoa River to include, somewhat surprisingly perhaps, the ironworks buildings, but that is part of the historic peninsula. The statute develops guidance policies for development, and that's very important for public interest on public lands. And so it's always going to have a focus on cultural, provide for archaeological and historic and cultural sites, and that public facilities are always envisioned on these districts. So it's not the same as the Department of Land and Natural Resources writing a 70-acre master lease to a commercial developer that might not have conditions that would allow for things like cultural facilities or recreational facilities. I'm going to take a brief chair privilege, and I'm going to ask Nui if she could change the angle of her monitor so that this fan doesn't suck you up into its vortex. There, thank you. Yeah, it was a bit distracting. I thought I might go into an epileptic fit if I kept watching it. So
Sorry about that.
no, it's cool. So anyway, one of the things community development districts can have access to is financial aid from the federal government because they are themselves one polity to another. So that's accepting monies, grants, and can establish bonding. So the development district can have or be allocated a special fund. So special funds are lightning rods at this legislature. So you can expect, and there is testimony opposed to special funds by the Luis Salaverria. There is concern by DLNR. They have testimony against the language of developing a special fund. They want to make sure they preserve some or all the income currently generated on the peninsula. So, those are entities defending their interests, their income. So that's always going to be significant when one state agency opposes another state agency because they're losing a part of their income stream. One of the things that occurs when you develop a community development district in an individual a subset community is two representatives from that district go to sit on the statewide board. Just as that statewide board will have members that sit in the community district that would be known as the Waikea district in order to provide balance. One thing to be aware of is that all the members of the district are appointed by the governor, even though two of the general members, one is appointed by or nominated by the Speaker of the House, and one would be by the President of the Senate. It's similar to other state agencies like Hawaii Tourism Authority or I believe the Department of Land and Natural Resources. Anyway, list of nominees from the community selected by the Speaker or the President, join other members. In this instance, you'd expect ex officio members like DBED director and the local planning director. But there'll be a cultural specialist appointed by the governor. The at-larges are the president of the Senate and the Speaker of the House, and then two representatives of the Waikea Peninsula Community Development District. Those would be specific to the neighborhood, and two would be appointed by the governor. So that's the framework of the bill. The original bill provided for the transfer of the lands from DLNR to HCDA. And that was the immediate lightning rod. And Craig Nakamoto from HCDA and the legislators got together, Senator Inouye and representatives. And with the DBED director, Tokioka, they agreed that they would have that removed in the HD1 version. So that was done. So if you have the original bill, 818, you need to refresh it to the HD1 version that doesn't have that provision. So that's my overview. So if that's sufficient for basic understanding, I'd like to entertain a motion for action to allow an open discussion. So motions might include a motion for the agency to take a specific position or provide comments on this bill, or it might describe the form of communication of our position, such as drafting a letter or submitting other testimony to the state or taking other actions. This may be done using more than one motion in sequence. For example, we could entertain a motion to take a particular position in support of, as an example, or we could say provide comments, which is we won't take a specific position, but we'd like to opine on areas of concern. Once we've discussed the substance and we voted on that, we could entertain a next motion on how to communicate our position, for example, by letter, or we could suggest that one of us attend in person to make oral testimony. So given that, I'd like to entertain a motion.
Yeah, I'll make a motion to open a discussion on the bill.
And your proposal would be that we would submit testimony.
I think, yeah, proposal would be to submit verbal testimony, possibly one member at a minimum attending in person, and also written testimony from the agency itself, like a form letter, template letter of support, right? With a collective vote for or against. I mean, have the agency take a vote on a letter of support, right? Yeah, and pair both of those essentially.
So the chair hears a motion to discuss the positions to provide both oral and written testimony. Is that correct, Nate?
Correct, yeah.
All right, I'd like to have a second.
Second.
Thank you. It's been moved and seconded. So at this point, is there any discussion on the matter? Because that's a big subject.
Aloha nui. You're both on mute right now.
Am I supposed to be unmuted? Or you want me to say
If you
something?
have anything to say, feel free to
Um,
weigh. This is our time to discuss this and how we're going to respond. Yeah.
So I just want to be clear that I understand with the new HD1 version,
Yep.
'cause the original 818, they wanted to transfer from DLNR to HCDA, but now,
Ownership.
yes. But now the new HD1 version that's been removed, did I understand that correctly, or am I misunderstanding that?
No, that's correct. DLNR wants to retain, you might call it the ownership of the lands. Now, they might cede the management control, or they would have to cede the management control to the development authority, but they would still be the underlying landowner if in fact one agency or department within the state can be the fee owner of property versus generally state lands. I'm not sure how that works. Jean, do you know how that works?
I'm afraid I don't really. So I'm afraid I can't add much color to that.
Okay. Because it struck me as odd when they started quibbling over whether it would remain in DLNR's title or title would be transferred to HCDA, because I had an offsite casual conversation with a OHA board member, and he said that if there's any change in title of state lands, there's a policy in place, informal policy in place, that it should always be offered to OHA first because of the concepts of redress, of longstanding due to OHA in lands and monies. And so I thought that was it came as a shock to me that that's a policy of sorts, but I don't believe it's written, and I don't think it's a law or even a rule. But yeah, so with the title goes the income. That's the concern here with DLNR. They want to keep the money.
So now I have another question, and excuse me because I'm new on this. I'm new to this, so I just want to make sure. I thought OHA was in support of transferring the ownership to HCDA, or was I misunderstanding that?
No, they're in general support, or at least the chair, Kai Kahele, referred to general support in HCDA taking over the management of the peninsula, but that doesn't mean that they don't have an interest in how that, if a property is going to be transferred sometime in the future, they want a seat at the table. And it might be a partial allocation to OHA, some portion of the peninsula, or, it might be a, total or none, that would be sometime in the future. So no one expected this bill to pass through the committees unamended and undebated, because it's a big deal, 70 acres of urban land. So
Okay. I don't have anything else to say at the moment.
okay, Anna, you had a chance to look into any of this stuff? Do you have a
Yeah, I did read it. I'm just trying to understand it. Some of the stuff is a little bit vague, so I definitely do want to seek more information and comments from everybody.
Okay, Nate?
Yeah, I think it's just getting into the nuts and bolts of how that's actually going to work with DLNR retaining ownership, right? Where their decision making, where HCDA's decision making would start and where it would end, where DLNR's would start, where it would end. For example, there's I'm just reviewing the changes right now, and some of the changes right now, like side by side in real time here. They did modify the land transfer timeline, like a land transfer timeline to June 30th, 2026. They've got a due diligence period for reviewing the land and leases. They still have that memorandum of agreement between DLNR and HCDA to exist. I'm sorry, yeah, so this one removes all these deadlines. And
Yeah.
it's kind of unclear now when or if the land will be transferred in a way.
It's not intended to. They don't envision the transfer.
Got it, yeah, because the effective date got changed drastically as well. I guess that's just a temporary placeholder. Yes, I mean, the bottom line is the land's still under DLNR control.
Wasn't that something, Richard Onishi, please correct me if I'm wrong, but wasn't that something he proposed last week because we needed additional time for the mayor to review all of the
Well, what he had one of the key changes he had requested was there was supposed to be a memorandum of agreement between DLNR and the HCDA for the first version of the bill, and the deadline for that was very short originally. I can't remember the exact deadline, but
December
when
31st,
Mr. Onishi had requested that they push back the deadline for the memorandum of understanding to give them more time to come together on the table. The current version of things is just vague. Like there's no particular deadlines for land transfer that I can see, unless I'm reading it wrong. And so it's just kind of open-ended right now, number one. Number one is the removal of the transfer of the land to HCDA has been removed, and then there's no deadline for HCDA taking over oversight, as it were. Yeah.
Yeah, that's correct, Nate, and that's the upshot. Craig Nakamoto got together with all the principals in House, Senate, and DLNR and DBED director, and it was agreed that if you remove the transfer and greatly simplify the bill down from 18 pages to 13 pages or whatever the difference is, that it would proceed through committee more expeditiously. But I can assure you that if this actually gets out of conference committee, the bill's going to be significantly longer. There's going to be a lot more
language added and changes added.
Yeah, a lot more detail. But what's important is that any potential future details be discussed and debated at some committee hearing prior to that final draft.
Yeah, no, it's the sausage is being made is the best way to describe it, I guess. Right now.
And so this transfer from DLNR to HCDA is immediately excised in the HD1 version,
right.
But it could quite quickly or convenient, come back at some future committee or in Congress.
I think if I can just voice my own thoughts on it currently, because it's just something, an active discussion at the legislature. I think the best that we can do from my standpoint is to support the overall intent of the bill, which is to have a third-party authority that's well recognized, like HCDA, step in and form a new oversight structure or a new management structure, as it were. And then, we could also voice our concerns at the simultaneously, stipulating like priorities that, we're concerned about or we would hope to keep in said structure as well. But I think the first off the top is just to voice support strongly for the formation of some sort of body, and well, they already are a body. They're a large body that has the expertise and manpower to do this sort of thing, and just voice our support for that. First and foremost, primary, I think that is critical to make sure that is heard. Ideally, that would happen in concert, with mayor's office and even maybe the council. And secondarily to that, we could stipulate, or stipulates maybe a strong word, but specify the priorities we would like to see addressed within something like that, and concerns. Yeah. And that could be done at a verbal testimony and also, in a written, like I said, written document signed off on, voted on by the board. Go ahead. Sorry, Jim.
No, it's, that's the basis is, for all testimony is to first have a position that we're going to take, whether it's in support or opposition or just comments. So here we have the basis, the kernel of our testimony. We're in support of a change in management of the Waikea Peninsula.
Yep.
And we consider HCDA to be the relevant agency within state government. So we want to be in support of that. Working with the mayor in order to keep a county position forward, we would probably include the value of the Banyan Drive Hawaiʻi Redevelopment Agency having a position or a seat at the table versus us just being replaced by this much larger Hawaii Community Development Authority, which has staff, planners, large budget, they have income, they have lots of experience working with leasehold lands and state lands and working with grants and bonds. They have everything we lack as a development agency or authority. But what we'd like to find out, I think, and I believe it'd be helpful if we were to insinuate it or state it in our testimony so that it gets into the discussion, the debate moving forward, is what relevance this agency may have within the context of the transfer to HCDA. I'd also like to propose that we might learn something from prior county department employees. I'm thinking specifically of former planner Darren Arai. It's the original proposer of the planning department as the deputy planning director. He was the one who led the community meetings and the conceptualizing of the Waikea Peninsula. And he was the first person who expressed the value of having a prospective environmental impact statement versus a specific task-driven, this building is going to get built, we need an EIS to do it. He conceptualized we would do the whole peninsula. So I think it would be of value to us to reach out to him or other experts that we might be able to determine to make a presentation to us to help us develop more nuanced testimony. That slows us down. So I think putting in the base testimony as Nate has proposed is the correct thing to do at this time so that we're prepared for the next hearing in 2 weeks.
Yeah, and I want to just give context for people listening what Jim is talking about when he talks about a blanket EIS or a general EIS. Most times what happens is you have a site on a peninsula like Banyan Drive that may get developed, or that, and previously DLNR would think, all right, they want to maybe put this out to bid for someone to develop. Usually you would end up with a one-off environmental impact statement on a single site development. But what Mr. McCully is discussing the potential for is a broader peninsula-wide environmental impact statement that hopefully could serve as a foundation for other projects moving forward. I definitely want to have Anna and Kealohanui Browning, Anna Liu and Kealohanui Browning weigh in on what we're talking about in the short term in terms of providing an initial base position and base testimony. Go ahead, guys.
As for me, I think that the broader environmental impact report would be helpful for the community and for any stakeholders. But as far as the position goes, I feel that we are in line, to support a change in management. It's how do we do the community right, and moving forward is best practice. But as far as how this bill is going to impact, there is so much more questions that needs to be answered. It's a little bit hard to take a firm position but if we have to, correct me if I'm wrong, we are more in support. Is that sort of the direction we're taking?
I would say yes.
Yeah, what Jim and I, what Mr. McCully and I were talking about was to support the concept that a new authority needs to step in, like HCDA, who is a known quantity, right? In this case, we have an actual authority identified. Previous bills were going to create a new authority, but this one is an unidentified, in general, not trusted by everybody, I'm sure, but well-vetted agency, and that our proposal, what we're talking about here, is to voice, at least at a bare minimum, voice support for the idea that, number one, yes, a new agency needs to step in and provide management over the area and oversight. And number two, we do support the in concept HCDA being this agency. In the short run, that would be like our proposed position to take. Secondary to that, which, you know, how much of that info we include in that initial testimony / written testimony, hard to say, but we would also obviously have points of concern we would want addressed, or that would be priorities, right, in the view of the agency. So, and if you have any follow-up to that, Anna, please do. Otherwise, we'll have Nui, Kelohan Nui, speak on it here.
Yeah, I agree with you.
Okay, I have a question. So DLNR would like to keep it within its ownership. Did they have any comments on what their plans might be for revitalizing the area? Because I did not see that anywhere. Maybe I'm missing some materials.
Yeah, so they initially provided testimony, and they provided testimony on the HD1 version. And their primary focus is not to maintain control for management of the peninsula, but it's to make sure that any special funds, so you have general funds, which is the big pot that all the taxes and all the revenues of the state go into, that are allocated to the general fund. And then you have all these special funds, like the airport income stays in the airport and it goes into an airport special fund. DLNR has a special land development fund where all the rents from all of the leases go into this special fund. They don't make it into the legislative pot. They stay within the department. And this department is therefore somewhat or completely self-funded. So like highways, Department of Transportation is completely self-funded. They don't pull any general funds, and they make gobs of money every year. And DLNR has a huge portfolio of responsibilities. They control all the income that stays with them, but they need a lot of A funds, a lot of general funds. So DLNR doesn't want any of the income that comes from the Waikea Peninsula to not continue to go to them. They want their rent. And they don't get much rent off the 70 acres because the golf course doesn't really bring in much. That's most of the acres. But if this place gets developed and there's a building put there, they want their lease rent. They want money. And HCDA is willing to manage without taking title. And DLNR is willing to let them manage as long as they don't have to give title. So that's how the bill's proceeding at this time.
Yeah, and I should mention a previous version of this, which designated a new agency that had made it all the way through the House up until when it was killed at the last minute in conference committee. That was pre-2020, not far before COVID, not long before COVID. That version of it actually took those rents and used that to fund in part the new agency that was proposed at the time. So this is kind of yet another new iteration of things, but that's all something for people to be aware of, is like where those funds go, right? Is always going to be a contentious, but a topic of discussion, put it politely, for sure.
So one of the things that's illustrative for us as an agency trying to put together testimony is to look at other people's testimony, other entities. So for instance, this HD1 version has testimony from Councilwoman Kakiwara. So it has a boilerplate, an opening paragraph or two stating the general community interest and needs, and then it makes specific recommendations or requests. That's from an individual council member. Most of the testimony is from agencies. So one of the new agencies that weighed in is we have testimony from the Attorney General. The Attorney General's testimony, when you read it, is in complete support of DLNR's testimony. So DLNR in the original version testified solely on their own interests, but now they've recruited the Attorney General to provide testimony on from the same perspective that they hold. And this is how one agency starts to build a position. They have the Director of Finance, Luis Salavarria, also in this same area of special funds versus general funds. And so all of this adds weight to their position not to transfer the land's fee title or underlying title.
Yep.
And this is how they accomplish it.
So the special funds that DLNR is collecting, does that need to, is there like a specified, does it need to stay within the peninsula, or they can just kind of allocate it to anything that they own, DLNR?
Yes, the second part.
Okay.
The rents come from the peninsula or the industrial area or wherever they can collect rents, but they're used to fund lifeguards and shoreline protection and staff salaries. And famously, in the Tribune Herald, it was stated, this is what we use to fund our pensions. And don't get between a public employee and their pension. That's a joke.
Yeah.
No offense intended to public employees in attendance.
So anyway, but I was amazed when I read that it would be stated so baldly in the press.
Yeah.
Sorry,
So-
Kia aloha nui. So do you have if you have more questions, that's great. If you have a thought on the general intent of the bill and the general concept being presented, ownership aside, we can always bring that up as a concern. But as far as the conceptually, something like the HCDA stepping in and serving as an oversight and management entity, if you can weigh in on your thoughts on that, then I think we can start to progress forward, or not. We want everyone to be heard here.
Sorry, yeah, I just wanted to make sure that I'm understanding everything correctly before I give my opinions. But
Appreciate it.
with the knowledge that I have so far, I am in support of the HDEA or HCDA, sorry. At least managing the area. It seems like from my point of view that DLNR is not. I'm gonna take Jim's lead, and I'm afraid that I'm gonna offend someone, but from my point of view, it does not seem like it has been managed efficiently.
Thanks.
Okay.
Is Anna still there? Anna, are you available to weigh in? And if so, are you in support of that generally? And if you are, then we'll just move towards the framework or the crafting of the testimony.
Yes, I'm in support of it. Sorry, I cannot turn on my camera at this moment.
That's fine. Okay, so Nate, if we just use the guideline, for instance, of Craig Nakamoto's testimony from HCDA, where he basically identifies himself, paragraph 1, He does his department, his entities, support for the establishment of the district is paragraph 2. A little bit of history is paragraph 3. And then closure is, strong support, paragraph 4. It's pretty succinct.
Yeah, I was just going to bring up that question because we drafted a similar letter for that bill I mentioned that died in conference committee a few years ago at the end of conference committee. And this might be a question you might be able to answer it, or this also I wanted to just put it out to planning staff, including corporation counsel that's in the room, how we mechanically draft this letter. Because what we did previously was we had a letter drafted. We actually had one drafted in support and one drafted in opposition as draft templates that the board then voted on thereafter. And the whole board was able to review both versions, right? So we were able to kind of take a position. I just wanted to hear a little bit, and anyone else can weigh in at any time, just mechanically how we're going to go about that, because we're kind of on a deadline here.
Right, so you do have an option to, you can try and craft a letter right now in the, it's, as you know, it's kind of hard to have a lot of different people weighing in on exactly what it's going to say, but that is an option. You could draft 2 letters and then vote between the 2 of them. Again, kind of a heavy lift for this afternoon. One of the other things that you are allowed to do is the group as a whole can essentially articulate the position that you want to take and authorize one person to work with the staff to finalize that and get it out. So, so long as you agree on generally the content, you don't have to craft every single word while you're sitting here.
Yeah, that's what I was hoping for. I would be in favor of moving in that direction, like a designated person, and then I do think it would be wise to vote on that letter draft. Maybe Reese have another meeting scheduled ASAP. This is just me thinking out loud so that we can vote on said draft, right? We'll circulate it obviously to everybody. And people can even provide testimony, I suppose. And that's what I'm thinking makes the most sense at this stage, but I would like the other board members to weigh in.
One thing I'll offer is if you do want to put together a draft and then have the agency vote on the actual draft, that will require an agendized meeting. So it's going to require at least a minimum of 6 days from now. Well, probably 7 days from now. So at a very, very minimum. So if you're okay with that kind of delay, you could actually vote on the draft if you'd like to go that route.
Well, let me open this up for discussion so that we can find the best way to do this. I think that sounds like it fits the timeline barely, but the other board members can weigh in here and we can come to a solution.
I have an opinion on this.
Please, yeah.
So as one who's crafted and drafted hundreds of pages of testimony over the last dozen years, none of it made the Library of Congress. Testimony has value mostly on page counts. We had, 15 entities in favor, and then we had 7 opposed. Okay, it's simply counting heads. And I'm not being dismissive of the process, the legislative process and the value of testimony, but I wouldn't overvalue a nuanced testimony. There's not a lot of time for a committee to process testimony.
I agree.
They get it, and the vice chair make sure it's disseminated and recorded. But what I would suggest is that we come to a general agreement. We assign that individual member to work with staff, and we get testimony in place so that it's our foundational or base testimony. That between now and maybe it getting through finance and going to crossover, which is now a month from now, 3 weeks or a month from now, but this is the testimony we put into finance. Finance is a a rubber stamp. If it goes to finance committee, it's going to come out of finance committee. It's not going to get amended.
Right.
So whatever CPC does is going to be the HD2 version, and that's going to be what crosses over. So
Yeah.
what we want to be prepared for is crossover, and then maybe the floor vote, but probably not, just the crossover. So that gives us 3 weeks or so. And that's enough to perhaps interact with other experts, like I mentioned, Darren Arai or others.
Yep,
And then we
that'd be
can
great.
create more nuanced testimony, doing a sunshine process if we act quickly.
So if I can just review what you're saying. So you're saying you more or less agree with that approach, but that we actually have time. The timing to get testimony in is more like, well, actually, well, it's about 2 weeks, I would guess. Then if you're saying 3 weeks, we can choose the optimal day to submit testimony in what form. But are you saying you generally agree with that approach? Appoint somebody to work primary and get more input ideally, to get a draft together. And then the key question I guess I'm following up with is to vote on that draft or not via another meeting of the BDHRA. Process wise, I'm not totally clear on that, whether that's necessary 100%. I think it sounds nice, but again, that's where Corp Counsel and somebody more experienced in the process would need to weigh in, whether we need to actually vote on said draft once it's drafted, right? We did that previously, but I'm not addicted to the concept. I just want to know whether it's necessary or not.
Well, she provided her advice, her opinion and advice. So what I would like to do is take part of her advice, which is to agree on a general basis on a core testimony, which is sufficient to put us in place at finance.
Mm-hmm.
And that would be through a designated member working with staff, and then having that testimony available for direct submission to finance without having a sunshine schedule agenda vote on it. However, our next scheduled meeting, which would be agendized, would include a more highly developed draft proposal for more nuanced testimony that would be available at crossover should it be heard by the Senate Waterland.
Okay.
Committee.
Yeah, I see what you're saying now. Yeah, so the near term one get done ASAP, and then have a more detailed one for crossover. So walking and chewing gum, basically. So I'm good. Thank you for fleshing that out.
Okay.
And I support that approach. Yeah.
All right. So the other members, do you have anything given that proposal from the chair, from myself?
None from me. I think that's appropriate given the timeline and the circumstance.
Same.
Yeah. So I did not have the legislative calendar in front of me, but we can check that. But I would like to suggest that Nate, if you have the time and the bandwidth, could you be the point person for developing the base testimony for finance?
Yes, as long as I can do so by phone and Zoom, because I'm leaving for Japan next week, Wednesday.
You've done testimony before, have you not?
Yeah, absolutely.
So this is not going to be a highly developed or tortured out testimony. This is going to be see what the others are putting in as testimony, follow along thematically, general support, just so that we have a foot in the door for testimony.
Yeah. No, I definitely have the bandwidth and the ability. As long as I can communicate with planning staff, for example, by Zoom, which I assume I can, then that should be just fine.
But I think it'd be wise or beneficial if you got it done before you left, and by that I mean 4 or 5 paragraphs is fairly simple.
I think it should be fine. Yeah.
Okay, so can I phrase that as a motion that we're going to establish testimony through the use of one of our members or by Nate Gaddis taking point on developing testimony with planning staff for submission to finance should it be scheduled, and to also work towards a more nuanced testimony to be available at crossover. We'll have to check the calendar on that. That would include the potential involvement of the BDHRA to work with HCDA in the future.
So that's a whole lot of stuff all going on in one big giant thing. And
Okay.
technically you have a motion on the floor right now that was originally made by Nate, I believe. And I, to be honest, I don't remember who seconded it, to basically take your position, right? You were going to provide comments. And so now what you're doing is essentially offering an amendment to that motion to designate Nate as the guy to put the draft together. So I think I would leave it as something more simple like that. And then you can vote on the, we're designating Nate as the guy portion.
Good.
Assuming that that passes, then you can go back to your main motion to say, now our main motion is to take the position that we've discussed, appointing Nate as the guy to communicate that, vote on that one, and then you've got that part done. And I might offer that if you are planning to get together again before you're going to do your more nuanced testimony, I wouldn't bother to include that. That's something that you're going to want to cover in your next meeting.
All right, that makes sense. All right, so we have an amended motion on the floor.
You need a second. I would ask you, just for clarity of the minutes, Jim, if you could remake your complicated motion down into the simple one of making Nate the guy and get a second on that, then you're good.
All right, so I would like to amend my prior convoluted motion to state that BDHRA will take a position in support of HB 818 HD1. Our representative working with the planning department on that testimony will be Nate Gaddis. Can I have a second?
I second.
Thank you. Is there any discussion? Call for the vote.
None for me.
Okay, so I'd like to I have a second, so I'd like to call for the question.
I don't think you, well, you don't need a roll call vote unless you are not unanimous. If you're unanimous, you can simply do a voice vote.
All right. All right, all those in favor say aye. Aye.
Aye.
I
Raise your hand if you feel like you have audio problems. Are you in favor, Nate?
I wasn't sure I could vote, but I say aye.
You can.
Okay.
Okay.
All right.
So now you would technically go back to your original motion, which has now been amended by your amendment, and essentially do your same vote again, which really just kind of reconfirms what you just did.
Not confusing at all.
Not confusing at all.
All right. So the motion is to be in support of HB 818. Can I keep it as simple as that?
Yes, yes.
Right.
Original motion as amended.
All right. Do I have a second?
You don't, you already have your second. So
Okay.
all you need is an all in favor.
All in favor, please raise your hand and say aye.
Aye.
I
Thank you. It's unanimous.
Thank you.
Okay. All right. And as Jean correctly pointed out, we can take care of any further discussion on this with an agendized item at our next meeting. All right. So let's see. Next item on our agenda is the agency's position regarding SB 1078, which is the companion bill to HB 818. Does anyone in the public want to provide testimony on this agenda item? Hearing none, testimony is now closed. I believe that 1078 has already been extensively discussed in its doppelganger form of HB 818, exact same bill, and it hasn't been scheduled. And so I don't see any reason for discussion at this time. So that's my overview, and I would suggest we defer any other action on this item because there is nothing to do.
Yeah. I move to defer any action on SB 1078 as far as this agency's position at this time.
Yeah, if I defer it, Jean, do I require a motion?
You just got a motion from Nate doing that,
Yeah,
and so, yes, good job, Nate.
all right, thank you, Nate. Second, please.
A second.
Thank you. Any discussion? All right, it's been moved and seconded to defer 1078 discussion, agenda item 3. All those in favor say aye. Raise your hand. Aye.
Aye.
Opposed, same sign.
Aye.
Hearing none. We're done. Okay, that wraps up the business of the agency. We're going to move on to administrative matters. Review and approval of the January 29th BDHRA meeting minutes. Have all the members had an opportunity to review the minutes from our January 29th meeting prepared by staff? If you've had a chance to review it, were you misquoted? Are you comfortable with what you recall? I reviewed it line by line, and it all seemed to be fine to me.
I'm good.
All right, no suggested corrections. May I have a motion to approve the minutes as read?
I approve.
Thank you, Nui, and a second?
Well, Anna approved, but I'll second.
Oh, all right, okay. Moved and seconded. All those in favor, aye, and raise your hand.
Aye.
And opposed, same sign. All right, motion carries. Let's see, we've completed our agenda for the day. I could discuss the scheduling for the next meeting. So Nate mentioned that he is traveling.
Not a problem. I can meet by Zoom. I'll be 5 hours behind you tomorrow, the next day. Yeah. But
Yeah,
all you need to know is I'm 5 hours behind you. So if it's the same time as this last one, that's totally cool. Yeah, no gripes from me. I can make just about any time.
okay, let me see. I put it all away. I'm coming up with where is the legislative calendar? What I want to know is when does it go to the floor in the House? Crossover is March 6th. Floor is the final floor is the 28th.
Right.
So we should have a meeting prior to after crossover, after decking and before crossover. Let's see, Nate, are you going to be around March 3rd or are you still traveling?
I'm still in Japan, but I can attend via Zoom. No problem at all. Yeah.
Okay. Nui, Anna, do you have your calendars? Do you see anything conflicting on March 3rd?
That's a Monday.
Yes.
Not at this time.
Okay. All right. I will work with Rochelle about putting out a census for availability on March 3rd. I'd like to propose that as our prospective agenda date. Okay, or a meeting date for our next agenda. And I'll work with Rochelle on developing that agenda. All right. Having completed our agenda for the day, may I have a motion to adjourn the meeting? Nobody wants to leave?
I'll move to adjourn.
Oh, thank you. And is there a second?
I couldn't unmute. I second.
So is that a second?
Yes, I second.
Great. Okay. Moved and seconded. All those in favor, say aye and raise your hand so that you can stay
Aye.
on mute and you
Aye.
can still be counted. Thank you. And even if you're in the dark, like Anna, we can hear you. All right. All of it's been unanimous. Thank you for this. The meeting's adjourned at 3:10 p.m. Thank you very much for your support.
Thank you,
Thank you.
everyone.
All right.
Aloha.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.